Muffled shots are fired in Margrave, Georgia. A man is running for his life and is shot by an unseen shooter. A gloved hand collects the bullet cases next to the body, and a disguised person in white viciously beats on the victim. The body is partially covered with cardboard. Jack Reacher gets off the bus and walks on the highway. He arrives at Margrave and enters the local diner. As he sits down to have his breakfast, the police show up to arrest him and inform him that he is being charged with murder. They arrive at the precinct, and he quietly looks on as they go through his possessions. They identify his identity from the passport he's carrying and speculate over a WW2 French medal. He's taken to the conference room and sits with Chief Detective Oscar Finley. He gives him a rundown on the murder case. The body was found by the highway, with close-range shots to the back of the head, and there were no casings found. The victim was male, in his 30s, and was beaten badly post-mortem. The victim hasn't been identified yet due to trouble getting prints off his swollen fingertips. Officer Roscoe exclaims to Chief Morrison that her search has turned up nothing on Reacher and says that the only proof that he exists is that he's sitting in the conference room. Oscar lists facts about Reacher from his file and insinuates that his profile shows a man who has killed effectively in the past and can easily cover it up. He agrees with the profiling but denies the allegation that he had a hand in the murder. He proceeds to lay out his summary of the case. He explains that 3 men dropped the body. The first is a professional shooter that knows how to conduct a quiet kill. The second person is someone who would beat up someone dead, and the third was in a rush to leave and does the cover-up with the cardboard. Finley informs him that he'll be in the holding cell until they confirm his innocence. Reacher flashes back to his childhood and his mother scolding him that trouble always seems to find him. He and his brother, walking to the beach, encounter a group of boys that provoke Reacher, and his brother agrees with their mother's earlier sentiment as they get ready to fight them. Officer Roscoe and Finley head over to the residence of Paul Hubble, whose name was found written on a paper in the victim's shoe. He seemed unaware of the crime until he looked out the window and noticed a black sedan. His demeanor changes, and he admits to committing the crime. When Finley questions him further, it becomes evident that he doesn't know the details of the crime and has confessed to a crime he didn't commit. Paul is under arrest and taken to the holding cell, replacing Reacher. Reacher and Finley go outside, and when asked for any information, he points out that Officer Stevenson might know based on the look he shared with Paul when he came in. Finley calls Stevenson into the office with Reacher and asks if he's withholding information. He tells him that Paul was at a family gathering during the time of the crime and that he drove him home in the morning. Following that, Finley informs Reacher that he's going to lock him up until they can confirm he was on the bus during the crime. Reacher and Paul arrive in lockup and get taken to a cell by a guy named Skyvy. They wake up the next day to find that instead of solitary confinement, they've been placed with lifers. A confrontation takes place in the cell where Reacher defends Paul from some inmates that break Paul's glasses, and he takes one of the guy's shades in return. While sitting outside, Paul confesses to Reacher that he is just a currency manager that has been forced into a financial scheme. He has received very violent threats to him and his family if he does anything to sabotage the operation. An attempt is made on their life when he and Paul venture into the bathroom. A fight ensues with a couple of inmates, with Reacher the only one left standing. The guards rush in and take them up to a solitary room, saying there has been a mix-up and that they should have been placed there to begin with. Officer Roscoe gives Finley the profile she found on Reacher, which outlines a stellar military career filled with achievements. She expresses her opinion that he shouldn't be in prison. Reacher mentions to Paul that the guys in the shower were targeting him and the mix-up the guard mentioned was deliberate. They get released, and Officer Roscoe offers Reacher a ride. She mentions that they confirmed he was on a bus during the crime. He mentions the incident in jail and that he's planning to leave town, and they decide to have dinner before he does. While on a trip to a thrift store, he tells her about how he travels light and came into Margrave to check about a blues singer, Blind Blake, that his brother talked to him about. Reacher walks around town and ends up in a barbershop to get a shave. He has a conversation with the barber, Mr. Mosley, and learns about the Kleiner Foundation that was set up 5 years back. The mayor gave a good deal on land to the company, and in return, Kleiner pours money into the town. He notices a car that parks outside, and the barber mentions that it's Kleiner Jr. and his cousin Dawson. He steps outside to confront them, and Kleiner Jr. mentions something from Reacher's past in Baghdad, indicating that he has looked into him and makes veiled threats before driving off. He arrives at the precinct to meet with Roscoe, and she mentions that another body was found shot with the same caliber. Finley comes out and asks him if Paul said anything to him in jail. He denies any knowledge and gets coerced to go with them to the mortuary. In an unexpected turn of events, he identifies the first body found as his brother Joe. The episode concludes with Reacher making an exclamation that he has to find everyone responsible and kill every last one of them. Officer Roscoe gets assigned to tail Reacher, and they end up heading to Paul's house and find him absent. Reacher snoops in Paul's mudroom and finds a seed on his shoe, while Roscoe speaks with Paul's wife, Charlie. Outside Paul's residence, Reacher tells Roscoe that he realized Paul was the target in prison. They identified Reacher by the glasses he was wearing and mistook him for Paul. So he's either on the run or they've got him and he's dead. He also shows her the seed he found, which she says grows in tall grasses in their town. They head to the crime scene to see if the seeds grow there, and Reacher speculates how the crime went down. He tells Roscoe that his brother had no family and the last time they talked, he was working in Homeland Security. Roscoe tails Reacher to his motel, and a fight ensues between him and 4 local guys who have been paid by Kleiner Jr. to confront him. They attack him, and he leaves 3 of them injured and enters his room. 4 people in white hazmat suits leave a car and are seen heading into a house at night. Reacher has a confrontation with a man when he notices the owner was not giving his dog water. Reacher arrives at the precinct to learn that Chief Morrison has been murdered. He heads to the crime scene with Roscoe. When Finley mentions that the scene was beyond gruesome, Reacher accurately guesses that the chief has been nailed to the wall. They head in, and Reacher surmises that the killers were the same since they wore rubber overshoes and latex gloves similar to whoever killed his brother and said they were probably for this time. Outside the crime scene, Reacher explains that Paul told him in prison that the people he worked for threatened to nail him to the wall and castrate him like the scene they just saw. He deduces that the chief was working with whoever Paul was mixed up with and speculates on who else on the force is crooked. They conclude that the mayor is under the influence of whoever is behind this since he appointed himself chief and suspect Stevenson and Baker as well. Roscoe and Reacher go to Paul's residence and find that he hasn't returned home the previous night. Roscoe stays behind to protect the family while he borrows Charlie's car to find Finley. Reacher enters the meeting in the town hall, where the mayor was assuring residents that the crimes will be resolved. The crowd starts to throw accusations and express their agitation. Mr. Kleiner gets up front and reassures everyone that he has faith that it'll all be resolved and that he'll provide all the provisions necessary for the investigation. The mayor tells Finley that there are no ties between the murders and gives him an order to investigate past criminals that Morrison put away who have gotten out of lockup. Outside, Finley informs Reacher that the mayor wants him to frame the murder as a revenge killing. Reacher tells him that they need to look into Kleiner and to give Roscoe and him cover to work the real angles. Finley says he'll arrange for an old friend, Prickard in the FBI, to provide protection for Hubbell's family. The mayor approaches Reacher and gives him his condolences and says that they will find who was responsible, and Reacher informs him that he'll be staying in town. The barber, Mr. Mosley, warns him about some Spanish guys who have been asking about him who didn't seem very friendly. Reacher flashes back to when he and Joe found a boy being bullied, and they defended him. Charlie and the kids are handed over to the care of Agent Picard, who'll be protecting them on his own time since the FBI isn't involved in any formal capacity. Reacher calls into the guard at the prison, Skivey, under the guise of being Finley, and sets up a meeting with him. Skivey knew he was being set up and came with reinforcements. He leaves Reacher with 2 armed Spanish guys, and their scuffle is cut short when they hear sirens. Reacher runs away just as an officer arrives. Reacher tells Finley and Roscoe about his run-in with the Spanish guys that were South American military based on their fighting style. Roscoe mentions that she's found that Joe was working for the Secret Service's Division of Homeland. Reacher and Roscoe head off to a roadhouse just across the border of Alabama to grab a drink. They have a beer and slow dance. A police officer on the road informs them that the road is blocked due to flooding, and they find a room in a nearby motel. Reacher sleeps on the floor, and they talk and get to know each other. She tells him about the death of her parents when she was young and how she had Gray, the previous chief detective. He was like her family, and he committed suicide a year ago. The next morning, they come into Roscoe's to see someone broke in the previous night. They left a message on the door that said, "See you soon." Reacher speculates that they could have been there for him since his car was parked outside. The episode comes to an end with Reacher exclaiming that he's going to need a gun. Roscoe is pissed that they broke into her house and gives Reacher a gun that belonged to Gray, her former supervisor and closest relation. She tells him to use it properly since it'll be traced to her. She packs a bag since her house is no longer safe, and they head out to the mortuary since the second victim has been identified. They arrive at the mortuary and update Finley on the break-in. Inside the mortuary, Jasper identifies the victim as Pete Joblin, a trucker for South Freight Shipping. He has a clean record except for a traffic violation that turned into disorderly conduct. He was defended by Zacarias Perez, a seemingly fancy firm to be defending a truck driver. As they head out, Roscoe receives a call. Molly Beth, who works with Joe in the Secret Service and had a close relationship with him, is devastated to learn about his death. She tells them that he was running a classified investigation that he kept to himself and that he was the director of the Office of Investigations and ran the counterfeit division. She tells them that she'll try to get his files for them. Reacher insists on the hard copies only and tells her to keep it quiet from anyone. Roscoe heads into the station, where the mayor shows her the convicts she should look into, and she goes along with it and says she's running a search for a rented car. Stevenson approaches her at her desk and asks if she knows anything about Paul or his cousin Charlie, and she replies that she doesn't know anything. Finley goes into Skivey's residence and finds no one there. He locates a phone and sees a call log listing Kleiner Industries. While he looks at the log, he gets hit from behind, and 2 cops beat and arrest him, assuming he's a burglar. Reacher goes into the lawyer's office under a false name and story. He drops the pretense and demands the lawyer show him the file he has on the case of Pete Joblin. When the lawyer refuses, he strangles him with the phone wire and has him pull up the file and print it. He leaves with a threat. Roscoe springs Finley out of the holding cell, and they head out to meet with Reacher. While they have lunch, Reacher tells them that Pete's employer, South Freight Shipping, was contracted to Kleiner Industries. Kleiner covered the legal fees when Pete got into trouble. Finley updates them on the call log that had Kleiner Industries on the list, and they decide to go see Kleiner. Reacher gives his leftover ribs to a dog in someone's yard. He had a confrontation with him previously since the dog is neglected and is left outside without water. Finley gives the man a warning about animal neglect. They arrive at the Kleiner compound and note the lack of security cameras. They are led into an office, and Reacher makes note of the mounted animal heads in the hallway and remarks about a family of skilled marksmen. They ask Kleiner about his connection to these cases, and he denies any knowledge. He strongly urges them to drop these leads they're following and says he is insulted to be under suspicion. Finley lets him know that he'll investigate the case as he sees fit and that he wouldn't hesitate to have him punished if he hinders the investigation in any manner. Reacher flashes back to the past with his brother telling him not to let them see him cry. Joe was asked if he had bashed the face of the kids that was a bully, and he confirmed that he did it calmly. Reacher tells Finley to pack and move to a motel since Kleiner knows they suspect him. He could be in danger. Roscoe comes to Finley's place as he is packing, and they discuss the case. Roscoe says that she'll question Pete's wife. Reacher says that Skivey is the key, and he's going to try and find his whereabouts from the crowded bar they met in front of the last time. Kleiner Jr. is waiting by Roscoe's car as Roscoe steps out of the gas station and tells her that Reacher has killed civilians in Baghdad and that his connections got him off. Finley goes to a work party at Paul's company. His inquiries turn up that Paul left his employment a year ago without notice, and they closed up that department since then. A woman makes an advance on him, and he turns her down, citing that he's married. Reacher goes into the bar and forces information out of a burly guy. He tells him that Skivey left town abruptly with some Spanish guys. He leaves the bar and notices there's a car behind him. He heads back into the bar and grabs a pair of gloves from the kitchen. He notices the car tailing him and swerves off the main road. He puts the car in park and jumps out to the side and hides in the long blades of grass. He comes up behind them as they pass the car and shoots them both. He collects the bullet cases and puts on the gloves to drag the bodies to their car. When he opens the trunk, he receives a surprise in the form of Spivey with a bullet hole in his head. Reacher stashes the dead bodies in the trunk along with Spivey. He receives a call from Finley and gets an update that Hubble has been lying to his wife about working in the bank. Finley tells him about a potential lead on his brother's rented car. Reacher arrives at where Finley is inspecting a burnt vehicle that could have been Joe's rental. He tells Roscoe and Finley that he found Skivey dead and that he killed the South Americans when they charged him. Reacher says they need to keep the bodies hidden until they find out who killed Joe. Roscoe sees the bodies in the trunk and notices the way their legs were broken to fit them in the trunk and also sees that they have been shot in the back. She confronts him about lying to Finley earlier about them charging him. She gets unsettled and asks him what happened in Baghdad. He tells her that there was a group of kids that played around where he patrolled that were friendly to him. When it was late one night, he checked to make sure they got home safely and found 3 men from the village abusing the boys. He gave them the choice of turning themselves in or answering to him. They chose to come after him, and he took them out. They caused some diversion and dumped the car in the airport garage. Roscoe takes a license plate from a parked vehicle. Reacher speculates on what it could mean that Kleiner transports a lot of animal feed. Reacher swaps out the plate from his car, and they check into a hotel room. Molly calls him to let him know she has copied the files pertaining to the case, and she'll meet them tomorrow to pass it over. She mentions that Joe has told her about him, and they reminisce over him. He consoles her by saying he must have cared about her very much. Roscoe comforts him after he ends the call, and they end up sleeping together. The next morning, Roscoe tells him that what happened between them doesn't change anything. They go into Pete's family house and realize it was his parents' residence and get his home address without letting them know about their son's death. Teal scolds Finley for harassing Kleiner and orders him to look into the list of convicts to catch who killed Morrison. He warns him that if he steps out of line, he'll be off the case or will lose his career. Stevenson interrupts to tell Finley he has a call. Finley takes the call from Picard in his office, and he lets him know of a location to meet up. Picard hands Charlie a gun in case there's a need for it. Roscoe and Reacher question Pete's wife, who says she isn't sorry about her husband's death. She tells them that she has warned him about how stealing from Kleiner Industries was going to catch up to him. She showed them the empty boxes of air conditioners in the garage. On their way to meet Picard, Reacher tells Roscoe about his theory that Pete was moving counterfeited cash for Kleiner. The bills were produced in South America, and the money gets shipped to Florida. Pete drives down with air conditioners to keep up appearances, fills the empty boxes with counterfeited money, and takes them to Margrave for distribution, but not before he skims some for himself. He said that he was hoping Joe's files would confirm it. They meet Picard in an alley, and he tells them he has found the details on the burnt vehicle. The person with the rental was checked into a motel under a pseudonym that Reacher recognizes as something his brother would use. Picard gives them the hotel address. Roscoe and Reacher get to the hotel, and the man at the counter tells them someone Hispanic picked up a bag and garment a few minutes ago. Reacher finds the garment bag thrown in the dumpster and finds a note in the inseam of the coat. 2 guys open fire at them, and they duck behind the car. He tells Roscoe they should split up to make it harder for the guys to shoot them. When they split, he leads them on a chase and shoots one of the guys. Roscoe realizes what he did and goes in the direction he went. She gets there in time to shoot the other guy and save Reacher. She storms towards him and slaps him across the face, saying how she was a cop and not some girl who needs his protection. She asks him what he was thinking, and he replies that he didn't have anyone he cared about after his brother died, and it felt good having someone he cared for. Finley called, and they let him know what went down, and they speculate that Stevenson must have taken the call and listened in. They set up a meeting place at an abandoned farmhouse. Reacher tells her that he knows she might not need protection, but he was following his instincts. Reacher flashes back to the past and remembers his father receiving news from an officer about how the father of the boy who was injured was going to find a way to sabotage his career. Joe remarks that his father hates him when he stalks off after telling him he should have thought about his actions first. Reacher tries to go in and talk to them, but Joe stops him and says his instinct to keep quiet was the right one. They congregate at the meeting place to decipher the notes. They give a call to the numbers on the note and find 2 of them are college professors that are at a conference abroad. The other one is the Memphis EPA office. Reacher calls a trusted Pi, Neagley, to help him on the case. They arrive at the train platform, and Molly recognizes Reacher as she steps out. She points to the escalator, and they wait for her to show up. Reacher realizes something is wrong and tells them they should split. He sees the case she was holding empty on the train tracks, and he runs down the tracks to find Molly shot in the stomach. She mistakes him for Joe as she dies in his arms. They stop to release the dog that Reacher previously saw being abused when he notices bruising around its collar. They drop Reacher off at Hubbell's residence so he could borrow another car. He gets a Bentley from Paul's garage and stops on the way to examine the cows on Kleiner's land, still suspicious over the amount of cow feed he has observed in his operation. Reacher spots a derogatory term scrawled on Roscoe's vehicle when he pulls up to the precinct and pulls out in anger. Reacher heads into a cafe where Kleiner Jr. was sitting with others. He sits at the table, and a remark Jr. makes about Roscoe sets him off, and he beats all 3 at the table. Finley and Roscoe come in with their firearms raised just as Jr. grabs a knife from the table. Kleiner Sr. comes out from the back and tells his son to lower the weapon. He orders them to take Reacher outside, citing that all the violence in the town started to happen after he came. Standing outside, Roscoe receives a call from Teal, and he fires her for mixing up the plate numbers when the files show that the burnt vehicle didn't have one. They discuss the other clue in Joe's note that was in Gray's files. Roscoe says he didn't leave anything behind, and Reacher asks to see the box he gave her a year before he died. He inspects the empty box that had the gun for false bottoms and finds a small secret compartment with a key. Reacher concludes that he must have had a reason to go to the barbershop every month when he barely had hair. Mr. Mosley drags out a large suitcase and tells her that Gray instructed him to give it to her only if she comes asking for it. They find his files and notebooks inside it. They pore over them and find meticulously documented files about Kleiner's operations. Reacher finds a file that mentions Kleiner bought 116 cows, which is just 4 cows short of having to file as a commercial farm, which will require state inspection regularly. Roscoe is skeptical over his speculation about the animal feed. They conclude that Kleiner uses the Kleiner Fund to buy the loyalty of the people in the town, and it doesn't need donations since it can print its own cash. Reacher draws lines on a map to show how Margrave is strategically positioned to make it easy to avoid major inspections by police on the distribution routes. Finley points out the recent blockades that have been going on for a while, which must have made the counterfeit cash from abroad halt, making clients restless. While they speculate this, Roscoe comes to the realization that Gray didn't commit suicide but that he was murdered. Reacher flashes back to when he was being groomed so that he and his brother could go apologize to the bully, Curtis, for hurting him. They go formally dressed with their parents to stand in front of Curtis and his family, and Joe apologizes for hurting him. Reacher refuses to do so and apologizes that the other side of his face doesn't match the bruised one. They talk outside the barbershop, and Neagley calls Reacher to let him know she has found something but doesn't want to talk about it over an unsecured line. He meets with Neagley, and she tells him she found out that the JW in Joe's notes was an EPA investigator, Jimmy Wilkes. He was killed in his home, and it was written off as a burglary, which was suspicious. A cop in Memphis had suspicions as well, and they have an appointment with him to meet a low-level hitman that might point them to who took the hit on the FBI agent. Jimmy was looking into the toxic pollution levels in the Mississippi. Roscoe heads over to the mortuary and asks Jasper to look up Gray's file, and they inspect the picture of the head wound, which shows when zoomed in the shape of the object that struck him in the head was one that looked like a diamond, just like the diamond-shaped crystal on top of Teal's cane. Reacher and Neagley go to Chester, Arkansas, where the pollution level was the highest. They question a local about what happened to the river, and he tells them that there was a company called Clarin Chemicals that came into the town and polluted it. Neagley finds that Clarin has been liquidated, but the parent company was Kleiner. Roscoe storms into the precinct and punches Teal, shouting threats at him. Finley carries her out of the office. In the car, Finley scolds her for being reckless and says that she needs to go out of town since Teal is calling for her arrest. She tells him that Teal killed Gray. That night, Reacher and Neagley meet up with Officer O'Coin and his partner, Ribideau. O'Coin tells them that they will go talk to the low-level hitman since he might know something. His partner cautions him that this got a Fed killed and it's a closed case, so they should let it go. O'Coin doesn't agree, and Reacher and Neagley get in the backseat of the police car. They arrive at a motel outside of town, and Finley checks in where Roscoe will stay so they won't find her easily. They sit with the man in a strip club, and he tells them the shooter was a guy named the Viking. They leave the place after Neagley hits a man that was harassing one of the girls. Finley calls Reacher and informs him that Teal wants to file a warrant for her arrest and that he told her she jumped out of his car at a stoplight. Roscoe tells him that she'll be replacing Picard to watch Charlie and the girls since he has to get back to work. Finley says he's breaking into Kleiner's after hours to see what he can find. Ribideau puts a gun on O'Coin's head while driving. He says they threatened to torture his family and that he has no choice. He shoots him and apologizes hysterically, telling them he'll pull over and kill them quickly. Reacher and Neagley hit the bar in between repeatedly, and it comes loose and pins him to the wheel. The car goes over the side of a bridge and sinks to the bottom. Reacher asks who threatened him, and he replies that he only knows they had accents. Neagley and Reacher swim out just as Rubidoux drowns. Reacher tells Neagley to back out of the work, but she insists that she'll go back to Memphis and find out more about the Viking. Finley breaks into Kleiner Industries and finds Kleiner killed in a gruesome manner and sitting in his office chair. Reacher says they can assume the South Americans are Venezuelan based on the way Kleiner was killed with a butterfly cut to the neck. Finley goes into the station, and Teal lets him know the forensics are working on the scene. He says he'll head over, and just as he's about to leave, KJ comes in and takes a swing at him. KJ shouts about how Finley tried to sully his father's name by accusing him of murder. Teal sends him to his office and tells Finley not to go to the crime scene until things settle down. Reacher takes the Bentley to the garage to have the windows tinted and rents a van in exchange to be less noticeable. Prickard brings over Roscoe as a replacement in watching over the family. Reacher and Prickard sit at a stakeout, and Prickard tells him that his wife died and he has a hard time moving on. They notice a delivery truck moving from the Kleiner compound and follow it. Roscoe notices a flashlight in the dark and grabs her gun. She tells Charlie to grab the kids and, if she hears her scream, to run for the woods. They tailed the car without a brake for a long distance. Roscoe notices two guys sitting in the car and turns to head back. A branch snaps as she turns, and they spot her and chase her through the woods. She shouts for them to run as she reaches the house, and they run with the men in pursuit. She hides Charlie and the girls and tells them where to go. She lures the guys away. She shoots one in the leg and kills the other one. The truck stops at a motel, and Reacher climbs on the truck to make a tear on the roof so he can see inside it. As he was looking inside Dawson, KJ's cousin came out and walked around the truck. They avoid detection, and Reacher informs Finley the truck is empty. Reacher calls one of the professors Joe was working with, and his secretary informs him that he was killed after coming in from a late flight. He calls the other professor and tells her what to do to stay safe until he arrives in New York. Roscoe gets to the main road and finds Charlie and the girls. They walk inside the tree line to go to a diner. Finley drops Reacher at the airport. Roscoe tells Charlie that Paul hasn't been working at the bank for a year and that he's involved in whatever is going on. Charlie says she has known all along and tells her how Kleiner invited Paul and offered him a job. Paul was hesitant since he has only worked in banks. Kleiner suggests he come with him to Venezuela and see how things work. He did some transfers for Kleiner and sent him the confirmations of the work. Kleiner offers Paul a payment 4 times his current salary. He asks him to walk to the stables to meet with his client. He takes him into the stable and tells him about the way the racehorses that revolt at being in a stall accept their fate one day. He tells him that the money he transferred was illegal and that he's now part of an international counterfeiting scheme. He leaves and locks him in the stable. That night they bring a man to crucify and castrate in front of him. They tell him this is what happens to his family if he crosses Kleiner. Picard picks them up at the diner and says he'll stay with them until they figure out their next move. Reacher gets fitted for a suit and goes into the station to ask for Stephanie Castillo, who's under their protection. She tells him how the main thing in counterfeiting dollar bills was the paper, and Joe has made the production of that impossible to get that paper, yet he found it suspicious that counterfeits were still being made in Georgia. Reacher realizes he had it backwards and that the money was being printed in Margrave and being shipped to Venezuela. When he goes out, he's pursued by a man and ends up killing him. Officer Stevenson and his wife are getting ready for bed. She expresses her fear and asks about new updates on the case. He informs them he hasn't found anything useful, and Finley keeps shutting him down. She tells him she was unable to reach Paul and Charlie. He replies that he suspects they have fled or been killed. As they get in bed, 5 armed men wearing hazmat suits approach their home. Reacher has a flashback to when his family were about to move to Germany with their mother. Joe expresses his displeasure about the move, and Reacher agrees. She notices their confusion and tells young Joe that he doesn't need to solve all the problems, only some of them. She turns to the young Reacher and asks him what he will do with the strength that he has been given. Finley picks up Reacher from the airport and discusses new leads. Reacher tells him acquiring the right paper to print the money is the most crucial part of the operation. He also tells Finley that he had a run-in with a couple of Venezuelan guys that he dealt with permanently. Finley tells him they need to make a stop somewhere on the way. Reacher watches from afar as Finley attends Kleiner's funeral. Dawson Kleiner approaches him and implies he had something to do with the death. Finn carefully tells him that he is only here to pay his respects. Finley takes Reacher to the garage to pick up his car. Finley tells him that he hasn't heard from Stevenson lately. Reacher pays the mechanic with the confiscated counterfeit money as Finley objects. While Reacher goes to closely inspect his car, Finley gets a concerning call. They arrive at Stevenson's house, which has now become a crime scene. Stevenson and his wife are found tortured and killed. Reacher tells Finley that the motive behind this murder was to get information, clearing Stevenson of their suspicions. Finley suspects Stevenson seemingly working closely with them might be the reason he was targeted. Teal pulls Reacher and Finley outside and angrily informs Finley that he is fired. He expresses his disappointment, stating the case has gotten beyond Finley's control. He gives Reacher a stern warning to leave the crime scene lest he be arrested. Finley suspects he did it to stop them from digging deeper. Reacher asks Officer Baker about his thoughts on the murder while they sit at a diner. Officer Baker expresses his grief on the matter and how close he was to Stevenson. Reacher deceives him and leads him on to suspect Finley might have been the one behind it. He tells him he will break into Hubbell's house later that day to find the connection. Reacher goes shopping for tactical supplies. He then goes to the house at night and prepares for an ambush. He hides as he watches Dawson and 3 armed men enter the house in white suits. Reacher then makes quick work of the 3 assailants. An altercation ensues between Reacher and Dawson. Reacher is knocked unconscious and thrown into a pool. He regains consciousness just in time to take him out. In the aftermath, Reacher notices the paper on which his brother Joe had written his clues was soaked and is now unreadable. As he looks at the paper, he gets a sudden realization and calls Officer Roscoe. He tells her that they were using Hubbell to set up a cash-intensive business to get a shipment of $1 bills, and then using chemicals to bleach and reprint the new bills. He also informs her they disguised the import of chemicals as fertilizers and used animal feed. Finley gets a call from Reacher at his motel. While they were talking, Finley noticed a car pull up. He spots some guys getting out of the car and looking for him. Reacher talks him through breaking the wall to the adjacent room to make a quick getaway. The following day, Reacher and Finley meet at Joblin's house to find it burnt down. Reacher tells him they might be destroying incriminating evidence and tying up loose ends. Reacher then connects the dots and ascertains that there might be hidden evidence at Joblin's parents' house. Reacher and Finley start looking through the house with the permission of Joblin's mother. Finley finds a box filled with counterfeit money. They then agree to meet up at the farmhouse. On his way back, Reacher calls Neagley, and she informs him she found the hitman hired to kill the EPA agent. As Reacher walks into the farmhouse, he finds Finley being held at gunpoint by the same agent who is revealed to be Picard. KJ, Teal, and Picard hold Reacher and Finley at gunpoint. KJ shows Reacher a video of Roscoe saying if he doesn't cooperate, they'll meet the same fate as the Morrisons. Reacher explains his theory that the Venezuelan men were sent to aid them in getting shipments working again. And with the delays due to blockades, soon they will come after them like they did Kleiner Sr. KJ tells Reacher that he was the one that killed his father, Joblin, and Reacher's brother, revealing he was the mastermind behind it all. KJ then orders Reacher, accompanied by Picard, to track down Hubbell in exchange for the girls. Picard holds Reacher hostage as they drive. They stop by a diner under the guise of Reacher needing a place to think. Reacher then comes up with a theory that Hubbell, while on the run, still needs to feel connected to his family. This makes his most likely destination Augusta. Reacher then pretends to spill coffee on Picard and steals a fork from the table. As they head out, Reacher discreetly punctures the back tire with the fork. Meanwhile, Finley is being beaten up in the holding cell by Baker. Reacher pulls over, citing the flat tire won't last till their destination. Picard orders Reacher to change the tire at gunpoint. Reacher opens the trunk and reaches for the gun he stashed, while at the same time Picard notices and fires a shot. He misses, and they both duck at either side of the car. Reacher then points out the stalemate and offers to drop his gun. Picard is suspicious but agrees. As they both raise their hands, Reacher uses this opening to shoot Picard. Reacher drives to Augusta and finds Hubbell hiding out in a motel. Roscoe and Hubbell's family are held at Kleiner's warehouse, where Teal keeps watch. Hubbell briefs Reacher on his role in the operation as they head back to Margrave. They stop at Hubbell's house to switch cars. Reacher then drives a truck through the station, pinning and subsequently killing Officer Baker. Hubbell arrives at the station to find Finley freed. Reacher and Finley raid the station's armory and arm themselves. Neagley arrives as they prepare their final assault. They all stand outside the perimeter of the warehouse as they stake out the security and strategize. Reacher siphons gasoline from their car into a water jug. Neagley takes out the perimeter guards from a distance. Reacher pours the gasoline into the side of the warehouse and lets Finley ignite the fire. As a commotion ensues to put out the fire, KJ and Teal are alerted to Reacher's arrival. While most of the guards are distracted, Reacher, Finley, and Neagley enter the warehouse through a back door. Reacher and his team advance while taking out guards amidst heavy firefight. Hubbell finds his 2 kids where they were being held and guides them outside. Reacher finds and frees Roscoe and Hubbell's wife. Roscoe stays behind as the Hubbell family is reunited outside. Surprisingly, Finley spots Picard, who seems to have survived. Roscoe runs into Teal and starts fighting hand to hand. Picard disarms Finley, and they get into a tussle of their own. Roscoe and Finley both manage to gain the upper hand on their opponents and take them out. Roscoe, Finley, and Neagley regroup and head to the exit as smoke fills the warehouse. KJ calls out to Reacher as they are the only ones left inside. They try to outmaneuver each other while using any opening to fire shots. Reacher, having run out of bullets, sneaks behind him and tackles him. Having been disarmed, KJ and Reacher start exchanging blows. Reacher pushes KJ's head into a vat of chemicals and then kicks him into the fire. KJ's upper body is covered with flames until he is consumed and dies. As the warehouse explodes, Reacher walks out to find the rest of his team. The following day, as Reacher is gathering his things to leave, he looks at a medal. A flashback to Reacher and Joe going to visit their mother, who was sick and bedridden. She reminds them of what she told them as kids and hands Reacher his grandfather's war medal. Reacher and Joe leave their mother for the final time, holding back tears. Back in Margrave, Reacher says farewell to Roscoe, expressing his gratitude and affection. Finley waits for Reacher at the diner and tells him he will cover for his absence when the feds come looking. Finley confesses that he is going to retire and go home after this case wraps up. Reacher goes back to the place where his brother was killed and buries his grandfather's medal, and he walks out of Margrave.